You're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh.
Hey guys, I hope you're doing well, and I hope that this isn't too windy. I guess we'll find out in post, huh? But yeah, the wind's howling, but I love just kind of the feeling outside as the storm's rolling in, so we're going to do it outside anyway and just hope for the best. I also hope that you like the little teaser again this week with our worship team, as they are going to continue to lead us in worship from week to week in little videos. And man, it's been awesome. So stick around to the end of the video and you'll get to hear them leading us in worship again this week. So it's our Friday recap. We're looking through week 12 as at what we've read so far this week. And basically we have 3 stories that we're looking at. So we had Judges 13 through 17 on Monday, or 13 through 16 on Monday and Tuesday, which is the story of Samson. We had Ruth 1 through 4 on Wednesday and Thursday, the story of Ruth. And then we had 1 Samuel 1 and 2 today, where we're looking at the birth of Samuel. So, as you probably read this story of Samson. You've probably heard of Samson before, but man, I hope that God spoke to you and you saw some new things as you're reading through it. Because the story of Samson is a story of a man who, he was just driven by the lust of his eyes. He got so caught up in the things that he saw. From the time he was born, he was supposed to be, he was committed as a Nazirite, which meant that he couldn't have a razor touch his head, so he couldn't cut his hair, couldn't get drunk, and he couldn't touch a dead thing. Those were the 3 things that couldn't happen for Samson. And by the time that that this whole story unfolds, he's done all 3. And it all comes from the lust of his eyes. There's a moment in his life where that's really telling for him, where he sees a pretty woman, and it says, he wanted what he saw, and he told his parents, "Hey, go get her for me." I don't know about you, but if I were to tell my parents to go get anything for me, they would slap me upside the head. But for Samson, it seems like maybe he's had a little bit of a spoiled thing going on. He got whatever he wanted. So he was this man of great strength, but he didn't have great integrity. And but we see a redemptive moment in his life where he ends up focusing back on the Lord at the end of his life, and using that to let God do what God planned on doing through his life all along, which was to judge the Philistines. And so in a great act of strength, he brought down a building on top of all these Philistines, and he died in the process. But we see that happen at the end of chapter 16. And so then we read Ruth 1 through 4. Ruth 1 through 4 is the story of Ruth, but it's the story of Naomi as well. Naomi was a woman who was married and had 2 sons, and those 2 sons were married as well. One of those sons was married to Ruth. Well, the husband of Naomi died, and the 2 sons of Naomi also died. And so now you have Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law that are left there, and Naomi's looking out for what's best for her daughters-in-law. She's like, "Look, y'all go back to your homeland, find you a new husband. You're still young, you can live a good life." And Ruth says, "No, I'm here. I will take care of you. You need somebody to take care of you." For this story to make sense, you've got to know a couple things. Number 1, there was a law of redemption of land that basically said that if there was some land that went up for sale, the first people that had an opportunity to buy that land were the relatives of the person selling it. The other thing is that if there was a marriage and a husband passed away, then the next of kin then would take responsibility for the wife, the widow at this point, because they needed somewhere for the inheritance to go. So this husband, when he died, he had an inheritance, and if they didn't have any kids, then that inheritance wouldn't have anybody to go to. It would have to go to just a relative. And so to ensure that the inheritance went to a child, then a relative of the husband would marry this widow, and they would have kids, and the inheritance would go to those kids. So Ruth is left without a husband. She's left. She's taking care of her mother-in-law, and in fact, she's going out and she's working hard. She's going out and gleaning crops from the field, which we even read about in Leviticus 19, why that was a thing. People were told, don't harvest your crops all the way to the edge of your field. Leave that there for the people who are hard up. And Ruth was hard up. So she's out there gleaning crops from the field of a man named Boaz, who it turns out was actually a relative of hers that could redeem her. He was a person who was able to redeem her and redeem her land. So he ends up purchasing the land. He ends up marrying Ruth, and they have kids. And the beautiful thing is there's a few beautiful things. Number one, it's what a picture of Jesus. That Boaz did what he didn't have to do. He redeemed her life. He gave her a new life to live with him, married to him. Whenever she was kind of in a point in her life where things were kind of hopeless, right? She had lost her husband and she was living with her mother-in-law, and she didn't really have a whole lot of a future at this point. Boaz redeemed her life. Number two, the other beautiful thing is that through Boaz and Ruth, we end up seeing their grandson being Jesse, who is the father of David. And so not only is she the great grandmother of King David, but that means that she's also a great grandmother of Jesus. One day Jesus would come from the line of Ruth. So an incredible story whenever we read the story of Ruth and Naomi. And then today we read 1 Samuel 1 and 2. And we see the birth of Samuel. So Samuel was born to a mom who was barren. Her name was Hannah, and her husband was named Elkanah. And so we see a feud between Hannah and the other wife named Peninnah. And so this is going on, and Hannah is just deeply troubled. And so what does she do? She goes and prays before the Lord. And she seeks after God. And God gives her a child and gives her multiple children. And she worships the Lord as a result of that. But also what's kind of going on there, so we've got Samuel, who will one day be a priest. But currently the priest is a guy named Eli, and his sons as well. And Eli's a good man, but his sons are not. His sons are taking all of the offerings that are brought to the Lord, and they are using them for their own gain. So they're, all these different food sacrifices, they're taking the filet mignon, they're eating it for themselves, and, they're getting fat and happy off of the sacrifices that the people of God are bringing. And so God punishes them. He cuts off this household of Eli because of the way that they're handling these offerings that are brought before the Lord. And so tomorrow we will continue reading in the book of Samuel. I believe we've got Samuel 3 and 4 tomorrow, which we won't talk about today because I want you guys to read that on your own. I'm sorry, we got Samuel 3 and Samuel 8. 1 Samuel 3, 1 Samuel 8 tomorrow morning. So I hope and pray that you guys are getting in the Word. I hope that you are following along as we're going through this, and I hope that it's fruitful for you. I hope that you're learning as you go through the Word of God, and that God is speaking to you and changing your life as we're going through the Word of God together in this Word series. As we close out today, hey, enjoy this time of worship that we're going to have with Danny and Becca as they lead us in a song.
Let the King of my